anybody else any other announcements? Were these left for me?
No, I think those are his. I think those are his notes.
Speaker's notes. There's a speaker. Oh, they're your notes. Where do you go? He's able. Say again? We need more announcements. Okay. Laura, you got any announcements? Laura's been on vacation. She'll tell you all about it.
Some of you have been getting the emails, this basket of goodies plus a second basket out there. I found out late in the process of sending out the email blasts. We have a congregation member who is stationed in Afghanistan, and our own Steve Galarizzo's right there in the black shirt, who arranges for our speakers. His son Greg is in Afghanistan, and there is a wish list of items. This month we got 2 nice baskets full of chips, pretzels, hard candy, stuff like that. In September, if you'll remember to bring personal hygiene. I've heard that sometimes they're only getting 1 shower a week. And Steve's son had an incident where the shaving cream was stored was hit, and all the shaving cream exploded. Baby wipes, Vaseline, chapstick. I'll send the list out by email, but when Charlie does the postcard, there's not enough room on the postcard to include all those personal hygiene items. So take a shot at thinking what they need, and if you remember, bring it along. And in September, our cook should be back, our chef should be back, and be able to do dinner. So be looking for that to get started up again in September.
Okay, again, no chocolate or anything that'll melt in the heat. A couple of other announcements. Last month, a couple of people came up to me and said that they would like to volunteer the following names of themselves to speak. And in my own inimitable way, I couldn't get them to Steve Galarizzo because in his inimitable way, he wasn't here. So if you spoke to me, I know one gentleman did already this evening, if you've spoken to me in the last month or two, try again with Steve in the black shirt, because he's in charge of scheduling the speakers and does a good job, better than I. So, we do have speakers booked up through December. We're recruiting for 2014, so if you have anybody in mind, or anything Germaine to say, or acquaintances who may be good candidates, we'd love to hear about it. Okay? Okay, to the subject at hand. As you've all read, Roger St. Germaine is from Lancaster, originally from Gary, Indiana, home of my old nemesis, U.S. Steel. But he was inducted into the Army Air Corps in '43. Trained in Miami, Florida, qualified for pilot training, was initially placed in the Air Cadet College Training Program. I think I better let you tell the rest of this, because I'm sure you know better than I can tell you. But at any rate, we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for coming up. Without further ado, may I present to you, please, Mr. Steve St. Germaine.
First thing I want to do is introduce my bodyguard, Mrs. Gloria Hines. Gloria and I both live at Rutland Village in Lancaster, if you know where that is. Well, I look around and I see some gray heads. How many World War II vets we got here? Wow. Okay. I guess I should say something about this uniform. I get all kinds of comments. I'm 91 years old. And my only comment is, my oldest daughter is an excellent seamstress. What I'm about to tell you about my experiences over 3.5 years in World War II is typical of thousands and thousands of men who were that age, who served, and many of them went through exactly what I went through. Would you agree with that, you old vets? Sure. Except for the places and the names and some of the things you did, we all shared many of the same experiences. For instance, I went to college under the GI Bill. Lots of guys did that. So what I'm about to tell you about myself is pretty typical. I want you to know that. There's nothing unique about me or special in any way. I'm just one of many thousands. I joined the Army Air Corps in 1943, in February. Basic training, Miami Beach, Florida. And I froze. You ever been in Florida in February, or January, or even March? It can get cold. I had come from Indiana where it was like 20 below. I was never as cold as when I was down there. And I wasn't the only one, because there are a lot of Yankee boys. We'd get in bed about 8:30 with all our clothes on except our shoes to keep warm. Fortunately, in a couple of weeks it got warm, and Florida became what it's supposed to be. I just thought you'd like to know that. When I finished basic training, or actually during the time I was in basic training in Miami Beach, I applied for pilot training. And we had to take a written test and physical, and I was accepted as a aviation cadet. However, before I could go to flying school, I went to college because there was a requirement that all pilots must have a minimum of 2 years of college. I had a year. So I got sent to the University of Alabama. I was there about 4 or 5 months. Took some college courses. We formed a band, and I played in the band, had a great time. But the big thing was, I met my sweetheart. You know what happens when a Yankee boy meets a Southern belle and she gets him under a magnolia tree when it's in bloom? He's at it. She's got it. And then she kissed me. Wow. That was it. I was hooked. About 2 years later, we got married. We were married 67 years. She died last year. She was a sweetie. I have 3 children, 4 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. And the great-grandchildren boys are little leaguers. In fact, they played right over here about 4 months ago at one of your fields. I came over and watched them. Well, finally I went to pilot school. Well, no, first I went to San Antonio, where we got what they call a classification. And there you were classified to go to school as a pilot, or a bombardier, or a navigator. And I qualified as a pilot. So we moved across the street then into what they call the pre-flight school, where we had about 2 months of ground courses. We learned what the Morse code was, and a couple of other things. That's a long time ago. And finished that, and I went to primary flying school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa's a great little town, but not so little. It was a Spartan School of Aeronautics. I think it still exists. It was run by civilians. Our instructors were civilians, but a good school. Flew a P-19, which is a Fairchild single-engine, open cockpit, and after about 3 hours, we sold. Some of the guys didn't make it. We probably lost about 10 or 12 young guys that couldn't make it. Well, that was 9 weeks. By the way, do we have any pilots here? Were you in the Air Force?
No, I used to jump out of things. Good at that.
There's one.
43H.
I was in 44G. Okay. Okay.
43H, he said.
43H, yeah. Well, I was 44G. Well, from Tulsa, went to Garden City, Kansas. Flat at the table. You could land anywhere. Over on the Colorado border. 9 weeks. Flew a BT-13, which we called a Vultine vibrator. Closed cockpit. The instructor was in this back seat, the pilots, the students in the front. 9 weeks. Then, Eagle Pass, Texas, south of San Antonio on the Rio Grande River. Anybody ever heard of Eagle Pass? There's one, couple, three. Yeah. Well, graduated there, 44G, August the 4th, 1944. And from there, got shoved around a little while, got in the pipeline to eventually go as a replacement pilot in one of the Air Forces. Finally went to gunnery school at Waycross, Georgia. Anybody know where Waycross, Georgia is? On the ocean. And we went out over the ocean and flew aerial gunnery for 9 weeks. I know there's some ladies here, but I got to tell you a story. When I was at Waycross, one day, taking off for a flight, a jet came in. One of the first ones, I think it was a P-80 or something like that. We had never seen a jet. We heard about it. One of the first jets that was operational. This guy came in to the airfield for some reason, and I'm ready to take off, and the jet's in front of me. He's taxiing out, and he calls the tower for takeoff instructions. They told him what tower. Pardon the French. But the tower guy said, "Okay, 321, you're cleared for takeoff. Now blow it out your ass." I'll never forget that as long as I live. Okay, well, I finally went overseas in February of 45. The war was over, you know, in May. So I was there just a couple of months as a replacement pilot in the 55th Fighter Group at Wormingford, England, just outside of Colchester. I saw a guy here with a 55th Fighter Group on his shirt. a while ago coming up here. You won't admit it. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the 8th Air Force, because you got to understand this to appreciate the guys that served. That sounds like a jet ticket. World War II could not have been won without the bombers of the U.S. 8th Air Force, which pummeled Germany by day while the British bombed at night. In Masters of the Air, that's a book I read, this is taken from the back cover. Prize-winning historian Donald Miller tells a dramatic story of the American bomber boys, Clark Gable and Jimmy Stewart among them, who brought the war to Hitler's doorstep before Allied soldiers stepped on German soil. The 8th Air Force began a limited bombing campaign in mid-1942. Losses were horrendous and grew even worse until a new type of fighter plane arrived to escort the bombers and their runs. That was the P-51, the one that my group was flying. Fortunately, eventually the bombing succeeded, destroying rail junctions and oil refineries and crippling the German war effort, while the fighter escorts decimated the Luftwaffe. But the price of success was high. The 8th lost more men in the war than the U.S. Marine Corps. Even the survivors suffered horribly from the freezing conditions aboard the bombers and the tremendous mental strain of flying what were nearly suicide missions. Let me give you some figures. There were about 100 air bases in England, of which 40 were bomber bases. By the end of the war, 26,000 deaths, 8th Air Force. More than the Marine Corps, as I've said. 77% of the casualties were before D-Day. In the first 10 months, the 8th Air Force lost 88 bombers and 1,900 men. The loss rate overall was 51%. In the beginning, as I just read, the bombers had no fighter escort. And that was bad because the Germans, fighters, the Luftwaffe, they were experienced. And they shot our bombers down. And the flak gun terrible. That's why the casualties were so high. When the P-51 came along, we were able to go with the bombers all the way into Germany with wing tanks and back. Before that, the P-38s and the P-47 fighters couldn't go all the way, they didn't have the range. So without a doubt, when the 51 came along, the war was shortened by several months, without a doubt. There were somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000 civilians killed in Germany due to the bombing. One last statistic. 45,000 English women married American boys. And most of them came to the U.S. I had no idea there were that many. I'll bet you all knows a woman who came from England. Okay. When I got to England, the first thing we had to do was get checked out in a P-51. In aerial at my age, I forget a word every once in a while. When I was at Waycross, aerial gunnery, we flew the old P-40. You know what that is? That's the one that they painted the tiger's teeth on the sides. General Chenault had those in China. Well, we had to get checked out in a P-51. So I think there were 4 of us replacement pilots there. And so we had one of the pilots who was getting ready to go home, came out and talked to us and got us in the cockpit. And after about an hour, we got on the plane and took off. Well, this, I think he was a captain. He said, now you guys, when you get in your airplane, you're out here getting a little flying time. If you see any P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group down the road, you buzz them and shoot them down. Well, you know what he was saying. Well, I had maybe 1 hour, 2 hours in a P-51, and I'm up there at about 5,000 or 6,000 feet. I look down, and there's a P-47 Thunderbolt. We called them jugs. Good airplane. Not as fast, not as nimble as a 51. So boy, I went zooming after it. I made a pass and pulled up. I looked around, he's not there. I looked around the second time, he's on my tail. Oh, I put the juice to it. I looped, I rolled, I did everything I could. I couldn't get rid of him. He was on my butt, and I was dead. He'd have shot me down, no question about it. Finally, after about 15 minutes of that, we wore leather helmets in those days, and I'm sweating. So I wiggled my wings, he comes up alongside. And I looked at this jug, there were 8 swastikas on the side. Here's an ace with probably 1,000 hours chasing this little second lieutenant with 2 hours. I never told anybody. The point is this, and I was humbled. It's not the airplane, it's the pilot. This guy knew how to fly his airplane. You know, although I had a so-called faster, better airplane, he knew how to shoot me down. That's a lesson in life. It's not the equipment. It's the experience. Well, as I say, we got checked out. And for 2 months, we couldn't fly because it took too much gas to go across the channel. The 9th Air Force was on the continent, and we sat, and we sat, and we bitched, and we griped, and we complained, especially us new young jerks, squirts, that wanted to fly. Well, as I say, it was less than 2 months, the war was over in England, in Europe, VE Day. May. So I transferred to another group over near Ipswich, 479th Fighter Group, that was scheduled to go to Japan. You know, if I'd have gone, probably never come back. If we'd have gone to Japan to fight the Japs, they would have never given up. We would have probably been killed by the thousands. The Japs would have never given up. The smartest thing our president ever did was to drop those bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We'd have fought that war for 2 years till the last man. They would have never given up. So as I look back, I'm glad I didn't go, but I was scheduled to go. Well, war was over in Japan in August. So I didn't have enough points to come home. You had to have so much experience and time over there before you get home. I didn't have enough because I'd only been there a short time. So they said, where do you want to go? I said, well, my father was a Frenchman, got a French name. How about if I go to France? So they sent me to France, 9th Air Force. I got assigned to a little 36 R&R reclamation group. During the war, they went out in the field and got down airplanes and threw off the good parts and brought them back, and we used them. There was about 20 ground pounders. You guys know what a ground pounder is. And I think there were 3 of us pilots. Well, our job was to clean out airfields in Europe. You got to remember, after the war, there were trucks and equipment and airplanes and gliders all over Europe that had been there, and we had to clean some of them out. So I got sent to an airfield, Korea, I can't remember, it's east of Paris somewhere. There were 100 brand new B-24s. They had neoprene rubber in the bomb bays so they could carry gasoline. Somebody must have had the idea that they would need these airplanes to ferry gasoline somewhere. So this little group I was with, we were told, cut the wings off, save the tires and some of the instruments, junk them. I think there were 40 or 50 gliders too that had come over on D-Day, and we chopped those up, put them in piles. After about 2 weeks, we got a message from our headquarters in Wiesbaden. Our general wanted one of those planes. He heard about it. Brand new. So we got 2 of them out, took the dehydrator plugs out, ran the engines, and we said, well, now, we can't give the general a plane that's not been test flown. How do we know it's going to So my buddy and I, who was a first lieutenant, I was still a second lieutenant, we decided we'd test fly this B-24. You understand, we were fighter pilots. We'd never been in anything more than with one engine. So fortunately, we had an old sergeant who had flown B-24, he knew what they were. And so he talked to us for 10 minutes. We sat in the seat, looked at the instruments, and let's go. So my buddy Bertie, he was the pilot, and I was a co-pilot. And the old sergeant, he stood up behind us and showed us where the landing gear lever was. We took off. Our concern was not flying. Our concern was landing that big. Well, we flew down to Marseille, circled around, came back, and of course, if you ever been in a bomber or a big airplane, the wings go like this, you know. And in fact, the B-24 had a new type of wing called a Davis wing. It was thin. And when you're on the ground, the wings are here, and when you get up in the air, they're here. We didn't know that, but we figured, well, it must be all right. So we came back to the field, and my buddy Bertie says, well, I'm going to land this monster. Do you know he brought that thing in, and he greased it in like he'd been flying all his life. Even I was surprised. Well, that was my 2 hours in the B-24. Well, then I got moved to another, cleared out stuff there. I moved to another airfield, had some planes, and I ferried about, 5 or 6 planes to Stuttgart, Germany, where there was a big green field. Another story. First time I went, I took a P-51. I flew to Stuttgart, it was a grass field, landed, and the guy was there coming up, and they were lined up nose to tail. Must have been 100 of them there. So he motions me on, and I'm taxiing it up, and I get within about 3 feet of the tail of the plane that was there, and I wouldn't go any further, but he's telling me, come on. So I shut the engine off, and I got out, and he said, oh, Lieutenant, don't worry, we're junking this airplane. And he got in with another guy, and they pushed the nose into the tail of the front one. You can imagine how me, a young second lieutenant fighter pilot, felt. Let me see. Tell you one other story. Susan, I think. Anyhow, I flew about 10 or 12 different airplanes, all fighters, 38, 47. Had a great time, just flying. Came home in June of 46. And I thought about going to one of the airlines and trying to get a job as a pilot, and then I realized that the bomber pilots, those guys had twin engine time, and here's me with single engine time. They wouldn't want to talk to me. Not only that, but I figured I need to go to college. So I did. Went to Purdue. But before I did that, while I was still at Waycross, I called my sweetheart, and we got married in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She was a senior by then, but she had not finished. And so we got married in Tuscaloosa and at a Presbyterian church, and I took her with me back to Waycross, and in about 2.5 months, I went overseas and left her. She was a school teacher, so she taught school while I was going overseas down in southern Alabama. Well, let's see. Finished college, and my first job was in Ohio, and after about a year, I got a job in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Great little town. And this is the last of my story. I've probably forgotten some stuff, but it's not important. I met a man in Carlisle, and people told me that this guy is a religious fanatic. He was a Christian. My wife we had 2 kids by then, on a visit down south to her mom, dad's. I was alone. this fellow knew it, so he invited me to go to Sandy Cove Bible Conference down in Maryland. And he's paying the way. My wife's gone. I had no excuses. I had to go. So I went. Folks, I heard the gospel of Jesus Christ for the first time in my life. That was 1951. I was 30 years old. I had belonged to a Methodist church, and an usher had sung in the choir, but I didn't know the gospel. That Jesus Christ came to save sinners who would confess their sin and ask for his forgiveness. So for 3 days, I heard a new language. These men talked about being born again. I never heard that. Saved. I never heard that. And I thought at first they're nuts. They're crazy. Nobody can know that. But little by little, God worked in my heart. And finally, on Sunday afternoon, I got down on my knees and I asked God to forgive me. And he did. And I was born again. I tell people I'm a saint twice. Once by physical birth and once by spiritual birth. Well, I could tell you a lot of things that had to change, which they did. But God was very good to me and to my wife. And we lost a lot of our old friends, but we got new friends. And I became a Christian that day in June of 1953. That's a long time ago. Well, that's all I've got to say at the moment. Can I answer any questions about the Air Force or my experiences for any of you?
Before you do, let's first say thank you very much for what you told us so far. From what I can understand, you couldn't pick a better place to do it. Okay. Are there any questions for Saint Germaine?
Yeah, I've heard there were some terrifically high attrition rates in the different.
Let everybody hear.
Okay. I understand there's some terrifically high attrition rates at the different stages of pilot training in the Second World War. Could you talk about that?
The guys that got washed out?
Or crashed?
Or crash, attrition, one way or the other.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I know we lost most of our guys in primary flight training. They just couldn't fly, didn't have it. I don't know, we probably lost 10% of our men. I was going to tell you something else about that. Altogether, I suspect that young fellows like me who started out to go to pilot training, until we finished, we probably lost 25% of our guys. I'm guessing. I'm not sure of the numbers, but a good many. I can tell you a story about an accident I saw in England. I did go on several training missions. We flew around England. My combat experiences, 4 of us were flying on the deck in East England, and a flock of crows popped up, and several of them came through my windshield. And I had blood and guts and feathers all over. I should have had the photographer take a picture. This is my comment. But when a fighter group takes off, it has to be quick because you want to get up and get in your flights and get ready to go. The first guys circle the field, of course. So I'm waiting, I'm next to take off. The way we took off was one of our pilots was there with a flag. And when a guy was ready to go, he'd give him the flag and he'd take off. And as soon as he got his tail up, he'd wave the next man on. Well, after about 5 of them, 6 of them had taken off, the next guy took off and he waved the second man on. And for some reason, that first man decided to abort, lowered his tail, and here's this guy right behind him, and he hit him and chewed the whole back of the plane up, killed the pilot, and it was sad. The guy with the flag would wave them off. This plane was slowly going in a ground loop, and this guy with the flag ran up and jumped on the wing and reached in and pulled the throttle and shut the engine off. And he got a medal for that later. But that was sad. That was sad. And I'm sure that was only one of many, many accidents that occurred there. Any other questions?
This man's from Lebanon, be careful.
I was just curious if you ever met that pilot who was following you in your P-51 that time on the ground, if you ever talked to him. Did you ever meet him later?
No, I didn't. There was a Colonel Zemke who was an ace. An ace is a pilot who shoots down at least 5 Germans. This guy had about 16. He was in this group. They flew the P-47 Jug. But I never went over there, never met the guy, but he wouldn't know who I was. He would know that it was, he would know my group because we had the numbers on the side. No, he was probably laughing all the way down.
I'll bet he had a story to tell. Anybody else? It is with sadness that I want to announce the passing of one of our usual members, who, by the way, was also a pilot, Will Kettner. I don't know if you ever knew him, but he passed away. We have his obituary here. He flew B-17s. He became a pilot in 1944, so he's one of your contemporaries. So, unfortunately, he's up. So, if there are no other questions then, again, we'd like to thank you so much for coming up and talking to us. It's very welcome.
Oh, by the way, I've got a scrapbook and a map if you want to come up. I've got a scrapbook and a map if you want to come up and look at it. The map shows all of bomber and fighter groups in southeast England.
I understand they tore up a bunch of nice golf courses making landing strips out of them. Okay, thank you all. Next month, don't forget, on the way out, the helmet committee is ready to greet you at the door. I should tell you about next month's speaker, who will be Al Richline, who served with John MacArthur. I'm sure he'll have some very interesting things to say about the general, so we'll see you on September 5th. Okay?
I'm just going to have to lower it next meeting and make sure we make a point of doing that. Well, we should have just have a time. They weren't here, were you?
the one that followed it, the bunker and everything is still there. And the irony is, we haven't been able to solve it. You know, it was a United Nations effort for 6 decades.
And yet, I'll tell you, of all the memorials down there in Washington, that Korea Memorial is the most solemn. We felt just the expressions on the faces of guys sliding through the rain, and then you get to the point there where it says, you know, what your country didn't know for people who never did know.
You were talking about our troops. Yeah. You're talking about that guy flying the P-51.
Yeah.
Where'd he go? He's on here too.
Yeah, you shot me down.
Yeah, could have.
Now, you also,
Blair.
Good job, thank you.
Okay.
all those guys that lost their lives in B-17s and B-24s.
Nice to see you. All right. We need to get him out of here.
Yeah, oh, that's right, yeah.
Well, we went to her now.
But we didn't have a crew of
Take care.
10 men on those airplanes, you follow me now. And there hasn't been an ace.
How are you, Charles?
Who are they going to shoot?
The cabin, I pick up the kids tomorrow, we're going, we take them back to Boston.
Still have to
All right.
have 5 kills, but you know, if they're not up there, what do you do? Very done, thank you. Now, your degree from Purdue, right? Were you an engineer?
Civil engineer.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I worked in the engineering for about 10 years and slowly switched over to architecture. That's where I should have been. So I'm both.
But when you came up to Carlisle Barracks is the second oldest U.S.
That's
Army
right.
facility.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Our war college, but here's the other thing, I'll show you this. Now, when they have classes up there, the military students are in uniform.
Yeah, they're all
You'll see Air Force, usually lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
Navy, Marine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they can't believe how the Army provided those old buildings and houses for their ranking officers. You know what I mean? Because if you go to the Air Force Station, Ivy League College.
Thank you.
So we're hoping to keep Carlisle and active duty. And again, thanks a lot.
She's going to get in touch with me. She wants to be put on the mailing list so she knows the speakers will be coming out. Her name is Liz Frost.
You're married? 67.
Wow.
That's great.
There's a picture over here.
One second. I think I got everything else except for these two.